we don't give any more until a new budget is approved. I look at this, that we will now, in 2 years since this program started, if you add this 94.5 budget from this year to the 200 last year, that's approximately $150,000 a year our taxpayers are putting out as incentives for the county. I'm proud of that. I think that's a great program. And I don't blame staff for bringing this, because obviously the pile's growing faster than they can dole the money out. Well, we have to get a handle on this. We did not last year, and I say we, I'm including myself in that, absolutely. So I am not going to support it this time. We're 6 months, less than 6 months from 2018. Hopefully we will find more next year in some of this backlog, but the supply is simply not meeting the demand. And I'm not going to support this at this time, as much as I know this is a great program, Mr. Chair. This is money well spent and all that. We got a lot of wants in this county, and we just don't have enough money to meet them. So I'm going to leave my my thoughts and comments right there.
Councillor Black.
So there is a motion on the floor to support this?
The mayor has moved that
Okay.
be received as information, period.
Oh, just to receive it as information. Well, yeah, I understand his point, and I also agree that it is a good program, and it is being utilized, especially now that it's more diverse. Before it was pretty narrow, just on the facade improvement program, but it's being used for a lot of different purposes, and I think it is bringing or helping business out and making it a better community for small business in particular, and some of the farming community, to enhance their products and present them better and attract more people and make more money. So, thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support Mayor Luke's motion, but I would have hoped he might have included the second paragraph in the motion, and that is that we review the program, because I can see this perpetuating itself. Even for the 46,000 of new applications this year, I assume some of those are multiple year commitments as well. So we're going to be each year increasing our commitment to existing applications without receiving new ones. And so we either have to review that process or be prepared each year at budget, which maybe we will be prepared to do, to increase the allocation until some of those start dropping off, that we've met our obligation. So I share his concern about adding more money mid-year, and I know my colleague directly across probably does as well. He made that point on another project a couple of weeks ago. But I would like to see, if we can, still to have the staff do a bit of a review of this to see if there are ways of not making as long a commitment as we have so far to some of these projects. So I don't know whether he'd accept it as a friendly amendment or whether we should.
I would include that to the motion if
Thank
that's
you very
fine
much.
with you. I
You're adding the
apologize for
second
that.
part to that.
Yeah, the
motion.
2 paragraphs, but not the third. I apologize. I meant to do that.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was actually going to mention that as well, and I was going to call it a sunset review of the current status of projects to date. And perhaps when we're talking about the 2018 levy budget, we can have a lot more information and kind of get a better understanding of where we're at financially with this whole program. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Luke has moved that staff report DCS 1756, Community Improvement Plan Incentive Status Report, be received as information, and that Norfolk County Council direct staff to review the current incentive programs and administrative processes. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to one more. Staff report DSC 1752, Norfolk County Lakeshore Safety Strategy. Mr. Baird.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The report is found on page 55 of the agenda. Fortunately, there was a delay in attaching the draft policy. Thanks to our clerk's department, they did get it back to you, I think, electronically later that afternoon, last Thursday. And believe you have a hard copy with you here on your blotters this evening. So this report comes from the direction of Council to help develop a revised lakeshore safety strategy, is what we're referring to it. There was a lot of hand-wringing over the purpose and the intent and what the title should be, and we settled on this collectively. The report has been put together with input from the Long Point Region Conservation Authority, from Community Planning, from Public Works, and from Community Services. And so I'll rely, if there's any specific questions related to Ms. Robinson's or Mr. Cridland's department, I know they're certainly most capable of answering your questions. So I'll just refer to the attachment here, if I could briefly go through it, and then we'll take any of your questions. So again, the purpose of the policy is to provide Norfolk County and the Long Point Region Conservation the ability to support development in both Turkey Point and Long Point. We know that they have some, both those locations have some impediments to safe access and egress, and we certainly want to continue. We recognize both those communities play a very important role in Norfolk County's economy, and we do want to be supportive wherever we can. So our purpose here is to, if we have council support this evening, I know the Long Point Region Conservation Authority staff are supportive in principle as well. They were a big part of authoring the content, the policy work that you see before you. And it's our hope that by coming together collectively, and I do have a graph, it's just a schematic on page 3, so we can visualize being able for council and the Conservation Authority to support that ongoing development, limited or in scale or otherwise. It's going to come in combination of having a good policy that we feel we have before you. There's public education and a mass communication plan. You'll recall last week Mr. Cridland received your endorsement to go to RFP to do that. Ms. Robinson is committed to looking at infrastructure enhancements, so in either of those communities, Long Point or Turkey Point, if and wherever possible or economically feasible, that roadworks and drainage can be improved to provide greater opportunity for egress and access, and also for emergency response. And further, we've also included a segment in here which does currently exist. That's the Norfolk County Emergency Response Plan. We speak to it at a very high level. The whole purpose here again is to provide a document, a policy, an updated policy that will go to the province that we hope endorses their requirements as found in the provincial policy statement. And if they're in agreement, we would then consider this to be an amendment to our official plan, and it would help us continue to move forward and deal with those development pressures and so on. We do go into some detail in terms of what are the flood risks and the challenges in each of those locations, as well as risk mitigation. These are requirements that are already in place in existing policies, but we want the document to be all-encompassing and provide the province with what we feel is sufficient support that we can get their endorsement. If council supports this evening, we would remove the word draft. We would send it off to our colleagues at the province and expect, as usual, a 90-day turnaround. So after the break, we would hope to hear back, and then we would move forward with that official plan amendment. In terms of the short term, I know Councillor Height has spoken to it on numerous occasions, some of the challenges that the CA has with respect to applications for development, redevelopment in those two locations. And in conversation with Mr. Evanitsky, the general manager, he is, again, he endorses what we see before you, and he is confident that this will help their board move forward and support their staff, rather support some of those applications that they would come in. I know there's been a considerable number before the Conservation Authority Board that has taken considerable time to be dealt with. So we hope it's a bit of definitely an interim solution for both Norfolk County and the CA, but also most hopefully that it satisfies the provincial policy statement and we can implement it into our new official plan. So with that, I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Okay, Councillor Oliver, Height, and Brunton. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, to Mr. Baird and the rest of the departments that were involved in producing this, I want to say thank you very much, and I really do congratulate them. I don't know how my colleagues around the table, what exactly we were expecting from this document when it did come to us, but I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, that this is essentially exactly what I was hoping would be in this draft emergency response plan document. So I really do feel that staff have hit it pretty nicely right on the head. So that's my main comment. I do have one or two minor questions, Mr. Chairman, and I first of all would like to ask Mr. Baird if he can help me. I'm looking at page 7 now, where it talks about conditions of access and egress and provides considerable detail related to Long Point Resort Community, and that's fine. We know that's a major area. But I know in the case of the Turkey Point Resort Community, access and egress can also be an issue. It's talked about in terms of the new Hill Road and the old Hill Road. But I just saw a reference to the fact that we're going to attempt to identify safe havens immediately for Turkey Point, as we did for Long Point. So was there any particular reason, Mr. Baird, why there wasn't, at least under that section, conditions of access and egress on page 7 and 8, at least a bit more detail around Turkey Point as well as Long Point? That's my first question.
Certainly, that's a good question. Councillor Oliver, if you look on page 13 of that draft policy, we do speak to the safe haven, safe areas. And you're correct. At the time of authoring, we were down to literally 10 minutes before our deadline last Thursday to get this report in. And working with Mr. Cridlin and his first responders, that we haven't nailed down a safe haven in Turkey Point, but we're confident that that language there speaks to the fact that we do need to find something. We're not sure what shape or form it is, but certainly from a Turkey Point perspective, Turkey Point is attached to the mainland, if it were. Access to those locations and egress can be made in different formats, whereas Long Point is truly unique. It is completely surrounded by water with one way in, one way out. And that's why I believe there's been more emphasis on having a safe haven. As part of that, we certainly don't want people to remain in their cottages or their dwellings and just figure the storm will subside and we'll be fine. Through public education, advance warning, mass communication, that we can tell people what to expect, and the hope there is to have as few, if any, landowners, cottage owners in those locations when there is a critical storm coming forward. Right. We simply can't accommodate. We talked about where would be evacuation centers and so on. And without getting into too much detail, I know this council can be 100% confident that when the emergency control group is pulled together and we go through the provisions of our emergency response plan, that all of these things have been looked at in some shape or form. So there is a response plan that will be enacted, but it really depends on the situation and so on. So to get back to your question, nothing specific for Turkey Point yet, but it is a priority moving forward, and perhaps that can be reviewed with the right parties over the summer. So if we are asked by the ministry, what do you intend to do in Turkey Point, that we would have formulated a reasonable response.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Baird, and Mr. Chairman, thanks as well. My other question or comment, and this is on page 9, and it's item F under floodproofing requirements for dwelling replacement, major additions, and foundation replacement. And again, I think this is a section of the document that will be very helpful to builders and cottage owners. Page 9, I'm sorry. But my question, Mr. Chairman, is relating to item F, or my comment, and I'm just going to read it very quickly. It's only 2 lines. Plans accompanying permit application show the elements of the floodproofing design completed by a qualified professional engineer, including foundation design details and elevations. It would be my hope, Mr. Chairman, to staff, that it would be worth it to me for either our staff or an engineer hired once by our county, or perhaps by LPRCA, or both together, to come up with those design criteria. Other than the cottages that are facing the lakeshore, and you talk about that on the special requirements below that for Long Point, but other than that scenario, it seems to me that we should be able to provide and be willing to provide to a cottage owner or a builder what the design criteria shall be, not ask each and every one of them to go ahead and hire their own professional engineer to do it. It'll cost us a few $1,000s perhaps the first time, but then it's a design criterion, almost like the building code, that we can give to people. So I guess I'll put it in the form of a question. Why wouldn't we have provided the design criteria detailed or referenced in section F?
Baird or county manager or someone?
Well, I'm asking Mr. Baird, Mr. Chair, or perhaps Ms. Robinson as well.
I'll certainly, Mr. Chairman, take an initial stab at
Okay.
it. Mr. Krebs will jump in, or Ms. Robinson. This would be consistent with any other design. It wouldn't be customary for the public to be paying for engineering design work that would be used by sole individuals. Notwithstanding that, in our own industrial parks, we have done some pre-engineering and come up with some designs that would be incorporated into construction design in wellhead protection areas. We did that, if you recall, as a courtesy because we were selling industrial land to prospective buyers and then to turn around and tell them, oh, and you must do this. It was a way to add some value to their purchase, but it's certainly something that can be looked at. Each different design, there's obviously going to be different or individualized permit applications and designs, but I don't think it would be too onerous for the county or the CA to get, here is how you must design. We do that in our engineering design criteria. Here's how you shall build a road or install sewers, that sort of thing. It's something we could look at. I don't believe it would be too expensive, but it would be high level, and it would be items that we would use as check marks for each applicant to come through that, yes, they've satisfied these things and they are met with that. I mean, one such example is what the top of foundation or you know, for the flood. You know, if we see that figure, we know the science is behind it. We know that's the figure that they must build to. So I think it just adds a few more items that could be readily incorporated by Norfolk and or the CA.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mr. Baird, and I agree with you completely, and that's the kind of thing I was talking about. Obviously, the minimum opening elevation that we have in this document of 176.5 meters, we know that's from LPRCA, and everybody has accepted that as a design standard. And the idea of flood-proofing the foundation, i.e. creating openings so that water can pass in and out and you don't have hydrostatic pressure issues if the foundation has openings. That's the kind of thing I think for everyone other than those cottages sitting right out on the front of the beach facing the lake. So in other words, all of the cottages in Turkey Point and 90% of the cottages, or 50% in Long Point, I think we should do that. We should provide that service once and put it in this document when we can, and then it would be there and save individual property owners, hundreds of them over the next 15 years probably, from having to incur that professional engineering expense. And I know what the county manager is going to say, well, we can't expose ourselves to that liability. Mr. Chairman, I think we can and should, in this case, in this document.
You want to answer that?
It's like Councillor Oliver is Nostradamus. He does in fact know what the lawyer in me wants to say. There are 2 points, though, to keep it simple. Firstly, it's a safety strategy, and although we know why we're focused on Long Point and Turkey Point, this document is not limited to them. It's actually dealing with all of Norfolk County, and I wouldn't want to put, if council did support something of that nature, we'd want it to be a separate document, maybe alluded to, but not actually build it into this. This isn't actually the place for that, I'd say respectfully. The bigger problem, though, understanding there's a building code. Yes, the municipality enforces it, but it's provincial legislation. The province hasn't gone through and legislated, for very good reasons, specific physical standards with respect to engineering of buildings to be constructed in hazardous lands, which is what we're talking about. I think, firstly, it would be inappropriate for this county to do it because we would be assuming liability anytime something wasn't good enough in a storm event. For no particular reason, we'd be providing a benefit to residents of Long Point and Turkey Point that we're not extending to any other residents, and the collective municipality would be sort of backing that for no policy reason that I can determine, which is really quite key. But secondly, the beauty and elegance of the building code is that it says, you know, you need walls this strong, H-beams in this case, I-beams, whatever its standards are. You still need to hire an engineer to look at, to plan to build a house, a condo, an apartment, whatever it happens to be. There's no good public policy reason, I'm going to suggest to you respectfully, for us to take away that expense for people looking to build vacation properties in Long Point and Turkey Point, when that expense still has to be incurred by everyone else in the rest of the county. What if we backed certain standards, all of a sudden we're taking away the work that the engineer ought to be doing every single time someone's looking to expand a property or build a new one, whatever they happen to be doing. The building code qualifies that anyone who's looking to do some construction needs to engage that service. We don't do this for the rest of the county, and I'm not aware of any other municipality that does. So this might, I'm not allowed to argue the point, but there are some significant liability concerns, and we would be extending a unique service to people in two portions of the county that would not apply elsewhere. I just ask you to consider that. And I don't know if our engineer, who know a lot more about this than would I, has anything to add, but if so, this would be a great time.
Through the chairman to council, I think between Mr. Baird and Mr. Cripps, we've got it all covered, and there really isn't anything else that I can add of value.
Councillor Brunton, Councillor Height, and Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, Councillor Oliver just touched on something, and he hit it right on the nail. We tomorrow night we have a CA meeting, and on the agenda is the lakeshore protection. I think we have about 3 deputations, and I've talked to our chairman, Mr. Height, about what I would like to see, and we have the Riggs report from 2014. Now, exclude Hastings Drive because of the issues there, but the rest of Long Point are experiencing, not the rest of Long Point, but an area of Long Point are having erosion problems. And what I would like to see, and what we're going to ask tomorrow night, is whether or not we should expand on the Riggs report or get a new report that identifies an erosion protection plan for those areas of Long Point Beach that everybody can use, rather than have them do individual. Now, when it comes to cottage design, that's a separate issue. If they raise it or whatever, build a new one or whatever. But the idea is not to have everybody going out to look at shoreline protection on their own. It's ridiculous, really, in my opinion. Now, we may end up with a special levy on that. And I don't know what the policy is from the CA in terms of how we end up with a special levy versus it being spread across the entire board. So you hit it on the head, Councillor Oliver. I think that's something we want to look at. If I may, Mr. Chairman, on the other hand, I'm a little bit confused when I look at the policy of access and egress. Who is responsible for the design? Who says your new cottage or your cottage expansion is done according to what we like, Long Point or the county? That to me is nothing to, like, cottage design or changes are nothing, in my opinion, to do with access egress. That's really a responsibility of the CA, is it not? Or am I missing something there?
Through the chair, I certainly can't speak for the CA, but initially, before we can accept a building permit application, we need to have the endorsement of the Conservation Authority.
Okay.
And if what they constitute as development, or as it redevelopment, or is it expanding, it's hard to say. And I think what's happened, we had lots of discussion over this. We're saying, why is this happening now, and why has it not happened 10 years ago or whatever? In our opinion, there are more people coming back home, repatriating or buying properties along the lakeshore. It's probably the most desirable location in the county, that have money, that want to convert, small conventional cottages into larger properties. Could just be for a husband and wife or partners, but it could also be to accommodate more guests. And it's that issue right there where there's more people than what would normally be expected on a finite number of lots, that it is creating an increased risk for emergency responders. If we only know there's 1,000 people that are at Long Point at any given time, we have a plan or strategy for that. But if everything's allowed to redevelop unbridled, now potentially you have 3,000 people, and how do you accommodate those? So that was kind of the route that we felt, and we think we speak to it quite well in this draft policy. But from our understanding of the process, we can't accept a complete building permit application unless the CA has signed off. So that's
Okay.
the first step.
All right, and I guess that's my point. There's a bit of confusion, I think, from staff when we have the board hearings at the CA, and I go back to page 9 in the agenda, sorry, on the access egress policy, I guess we call it. Page 9 refers to different things in there, like, and I go down to B, right at the bottom of the page, it says, cottage shall be elevated on piles. Now, if that's a county policy, and Long Point has a different policy, like, we've raised everything on the bottom floor above the 100-year flood elevation, I think whatever it is, 176.5, I think, wasn't it? That kind of, so if those things are taken care of by the CA, they may overrule what you want. So are we going beyond the access egress policy with this, or I'm just asking for some clarification. I don't, because we have to deal with it maybe tomorrow night, and I'm somewhat confused.
Sure, through the chair. The content of the draft that you're referring to right here has come right from LPRCA staff. It's through the manual that they have. We don't regulate, that isn't specific to the Ontario Building Code. We deal with that with the actual building design. So that's probably a better question for them. And however, I think when you read this whole document as one, what we're trying to do is to give the Conservation Authority staff some degree of comfort or latitude to deal with each individual application, and instead of saying merely no, that because of this, that they are providing some sort of approval that would be consistent with what the province and the PPS requires.
So this policy then, should it not go right to the CA before it goes any further?
Through the chair, the CA, again, we worked in lockstep. They have this current draft, and we've all sort of, may not be perfect, but we've all had a chance to review it. If there's any changes that you guys decide to make tonight, we would change that and then circulate it again, just amongst ourselves. And when we're all ready, we would then forward it to the province for their review.
But the CA board has not looked at this.
No, and if that's something, I have no overview or purview of the board, that would, in my estimation, Mr. Evanitsky would be the one to bring it forward for the board discussion.
That's my point.
Yeah.
I think,
staff were directed to bring this back before the break.
Yeah.
And we have made every effort to have this here for you.
Well,
but that would be a good next step.
yeah, I think I have no problem. I think the board should look at it first before we, because they're the ones who are going to deal with it first before you want to approve something, right? Long term.
Through the chair, I'm obligated to this council, and this is a document that the 3 general managers have put their name to.
Right.
And we're making that recommendation. And once assuming you support it, we would then forward it to the CA to do the same, and whenever that next meeting schedule would come up. When everybody's on side, we would send it to the province. We want to all literally have our signatures on this.
Thank you.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is quite the discussion over this. I'm glad to see it come forward, Mr. Baird, and the other people that worked on it. I know it's been quite an effort, considering it was only outstanding for 30 years and got put together in 3 months or so. Would appreciate that. It's well written. I guess some of the issues I have, I guess, are on page 6. We're using geodetic data from 1989 from the topographical maps. Okay, we've rebuilt Erie Avenue. We have that number. I know we have it because Public Works has sent it to me. I've sent it over to the Conservation Authority. I don't know how we get it updated, but obviously I would prefer that we had real data in there. I'm sure Public Works is aware that the causeway will be being rebuilt in 2018. It's on the budget for that anyway. And it would be nice if we had some of that elevation data, because if we have to go up a little bit, or I believe we're supposed to come up a lot, which I don't think is fiscally possible, but something like that. I'm wondering if we couldn't get new data in there. I don't like us seeing us using 30-year-old data, especially when we have the data the road was rebuilt last year.
Just to respond, yeah, I'm very much aware the roadway's been finished. I think the final lift of asphalt, which every centimeter counts, I don't have that information. We could certainly, I defer to Ms. Robinson in that regard, but the information that we have that the Conservation Authority is using is from 1989. There's no surprise there. Absolutely correct. It would be great to have some modern science or newer science or newer data to support better decision making. And it may in fact be even better than it was in '89, which would support more development. We're not sure. Unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to collect that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Public Works could comment, maybe our GIS department could send them the GIS data that we have, and they could populate it into the drawings.
Ms. Robinson, any ideas?
Through the chairman to council, the GIS group is actually located in Mr. Baird's group. So I suspect if it's in that system, they already have that information. I don't believe that we have the final as constructed for Erie Ave yet. We do have some numbers from the preliminary work. We can certainly forward them to Development and Cultural Services as soon as we have the final survey information. We do not have an in-house legal surveyor. As we don't have sufficient information, we could always request an OLS to go out and do that should council wish that as well.
Okay, that sounds good. I guess my next concern is the notification to the cottage owners or the cottage associations. We have Turkey Point and Long Point. And because this missed the agenda, and I don't believe it's on the Civic Web site either at this point, so I'm not sure that anyone from the cottage associations or a single cottage owner has actually seen this document. That's why I'm hesitant to pass it today without at least putting it out there for some comments, while hopefully our staff can work on the updated GIS information. That's what I would like to see happen.
Through the chair, maybe just to get the conversation going, I don't want to put our deputy clerk on the spot, but I know it was just an administrative blip on late Thursday. I believe it was the electronic agenda was re-uploaded, so that information would be publicly accessible. It was council and staff with the hard copy agenda. We didn't get it. We were emailed it, and again, we have the hard copy here tonight. So we could look into that. As far as, maybe if I could just provide just a quick response. Yeah, Ms. Robinson has indicated we don't have the as-built, the final as-built drawings, but that would provide us with centerline elevations. And it was your staff, Ms. Minshall, and her team that put together the mapping that showed all the elevations and contours on Long Point and Turkey Point that showed the flood susceptibility areas and those that were higher ground. So
But that was with 1989 data?
yeah, that's correct. That's what we had to use. But
Doesn't work for me, but no, with the clerk thing and putting it on, maybe our clerk could answer, but we're in the process of switching over our agendas from our website, from the used to be Civic Web, as I understand it, and the meeting today is not on Civic Web that I could find. And a lot of people would tune into that because that's the site we've been using for the last, I don't know how many years.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Hay, I'm just sending confirmation down to the clerk and our council services assistant. My understanding was that it was still being uploaded through Civic Web, so I'm just going to try and check the link here and see if there's something broken or see if they've received notification from the public that they've had trouble accessing it. I've just started a new position yesterday in the county manager's office, so I'm just unclear as to what may have transpired on Thursday, but I'll get you an answer right away.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All done? Councilor Columbus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this lakeshore safety strategy has certainly been a long time coming. And I know that the LPRCA, hopefully the hearings will be much more streamlined or even eliminated. with it. The one question I've got is with respect to going to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, was there not any communication in preparing this plan with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs or Natural Resources as you were building it, this draft? Would that not have been a good idea to have them involved with the process so that they can push it through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs easier?
Through the chair, no, it's our job to prepare the draft policy, and it's their job to review it. They certainly are aware that it's being worked on, and there's a desire to bring it forward, but until they get the final approved version from council and certainly the Conservation Authority Board, that's when they would make their comments. So, yeah. And I just see Mr. Johnson, Mr. Chairman, has the electronic version is indeed on Civic Web, so it is publicly accessible. I'm just not sure when.
Well, let's hope Municipal Affairs supports this.
Councillor Oliver and then Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think you have a motion yet.
No, I don't.
And I will be willing to move the recommendation in the report, if that's okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly through to Chris. Chris, I guess tomorrow is our next CA meeting, and I'm wondering, we can't really deal with this report tomorrow night. The agenda's set, everything on. It's something that should be reviewed by the board over a short period of time. So would the August meeting be the time to put it in front of the board? That would be the next possible meeting, would it not? I would think.
I would guess our deputy clerk's tied up here, but this is a committee meeting.
Yeah.
So your decisions would be ratified next Tuesday at Norfolk County Council. But I would have no problem forwarding this to Mr. Evanitsky this evening for his review. And I'm not sure about your procedural bylaw, if you're able to add items at a late hour, perhaps not. But if it's the Conservation Authority's desire to hold off on endorsing this, the way Norfolk County Council may or may not, I would think that's more important, that the province sees that this is both endorsed by County Council and the Conservation Authority Board. I'm not sure the date, if that is August perhaps, I'm not sure.
August 4th or 5th?
I think it's one thing through the chair to keep in mind that, applications keep coming through the CA, and Mr. Evanitsky has said that he likes what he sees here, as do his staff, and that hopefully, as a working interim, that this may resolve some of their concerns over the short term.
Well, there's no doubt it'll help the board, but what I'm asking is if the board gets a chance to review the entire document in detail, I don't see that really happening for approval till the August 4th meeting. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but
I
Chairman's here. What do you, Mr.
We
Heights?
have a meeting tomorrow night, you know that.
I realize that, but I don't think it's fair to throw this in front of the board now. It's not even on the agenda.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I need to interrupt my colleague, but how the LPRCA deals with this and when, it seems to me, is beyond our mandate to even be considering. It's not our business. What we're being asked to do as county council is to consider giving draft approval to this ourselves, which I think we can and should do. They'll deal with it as soon as they choose to do so, and that will be important that they do, but that's not our mandate, Mr. Chair.
No,
Let's not get into a debate here between the two of you.
I'm not debating, I'm just asking Mr. Baird the urgency of going to the province, I guess. Is an August meeting dealing with this issue okay, I guess? Is that?
Through the chair, staff were directed to bring this report to you this evening.
Okay.
And hopefully we've complied with that. If you decide to mull it over or review it over the next few weeks or to the next committee meeting, that's certainly your prerogative, so.
Councillor Height.
I was just going to speak to Councillor Brunton's question. Mr. Chair, we'll just send this over to them, to the board members to review. We can either bring it up under other business tonight, but our agenda is pretty busy, so it'd probably go to August anyway. But really all they need over there is to see that this is in place and endorsed by Norfolk County. And then that should free up the development issues that we've been having, and that's that.
Okay, I guess that's the end of my speakers. Councillor Oliver has moved that staff report DSC 1752, Norfolk County Lakeshore Safety Strategy, be received as information, and that council hereby endorse the draft Norfolk County Lakeshore Safety Strategy as presented in this report, and further, that staff be directed to submit the draft strategic report to the Minister of Municipal Affairs for review and consideration. All those in favor? That is carried. We are going to take a 20-minute recess. Yeah, I know, it's 3:40. 3:40. Don't look at that clock, because it ain't right.